hatch first?
With pool first.
Okay. And that's because you don't have the low ground creep, or why? Or because the economy's not there?
By going speed first and delaying your economy by that much, your layer is delayed.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't be able to do it.
I see. That's something that we'll probably revisit in one of these later weeks on the show. Door drops and playing on temple and maps with cliffs and poorly designed stuff in general. I don't know. We'll see. I gotta tell you though, I'm most excited about our show next week. We'll talk about that when we wrap up here in the next 15 minutes or so.
Alright.
And just this far in the game, you seem to be doing very typical machine stuff, making drones. Oh, you get that ling in, that's actually huge.
Yep.
So what do we do with that information?
Reactor Hellion, I'm just going to make 4 Zerglings, block my ramp. Then continue to drone, I guess.
Continue to drone, the man says. Bending nest. Had a pretty typical time.
Oh, messed up.
So what's going through your head right now? What are we thinking? What do we see?
I want to know if he's making more more Hellions, or if he's going to do some sort of a transition. And it is more Hellions. That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah. Oh, Marauders are so good.
Yep. Yeah, I was pretty sure it was going to be Marauder Hellion. Shoot.
Lings on the way. Is there any chance of cleaning this up?
We'll find out, I guess.
Oh god, drones. And there's the GG. Alright. So the Marauder Hellion all in enough to put the nail in the coffin. So let's take just a second to talk about that build and what happened there, and then we'll go on to a little Q&A, and I'll let you get out of here.
Alright.
So, Marauder Hellion, it's something that I think was popularized over on the Korean ladder, and we're starting to see it a little bit more on our side of the pond.
Yep.
What is your thought on the build, and how do you think we need to be playing against it?
I think you need to be pretty spine crawler heavy, and then tech to bit earlier of lair, or you have to have secure some sort of map control early on, either by like speedling opening or something like that, because it's very hard to actually scout that opening.
Yeah.
Even though I got the Zergling in his base, like I wasn't sure if he was going to transition to like 2-Rax tank, which is also very common on that map. Honestly, I rarely have success against the build, so I don't really know what to do against it yet, and I haven't really received like proper practice against the Marauder Hellion all-in. But from my experience, the times I have held it off, I either killed them before their timing attack hit, or I got like extremely early Mutalisks up.
Cool. Alright. Cool. Alright, so I'm just going to go, we'll jump right into a little Q&A for a few minutes, and then I will let you out of here. I want to thank you right now in advance for coming on and working with us today.
Yeah, no problem.
And I guess as I'm pulling up these questions, I can take a second to talk about next week's show, which I'm quite looking forward to. Actually, we're starting the week off with cats on Monday. And
oh, wow.
As you can imagine, we're going to be talking about all-ins and cheese and ways to just be abusive as a Zerg player.
Okay.
I think it's pretty accepted that you know, a macro base is the best way to play Zerg, but there is certainly opportunities and ways to get a little cheesy sometimes. So we're going to talk about that next week, and I think it should be fun. I hope you can have some good stuff ready for us.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, so on to the Q&A. Hi, Machine. What's your opinion on throwing infested Terrans to soak up tank shells before engaging? Why do you feel it's so underused?
Honestly, I think I'd rather spend the energy on fungal growth against Siege Tank Marine. Like, unless he's talking about pure mech, in which case, yes, like throwing those infested Terrans is very important, and also neuroparasiting Thors, as we've seen before, is extremely important. But as far as just like spent energy, I think it would be much more worth your while to fungal growth to seat the Marines, and then go ahead and engage with the Zerglings and Banelings. Kind of hope that answers the question. As far as infested Terrans themselves, they're underused just because the other two spells happen to be better. So I guess that's it.
And here's a question, kind of. Well, I'm not really sure how to. Well, here's the question. This guy wants to know if you coach bronze level players. He knows he needs to work on his macro, but he thinks he really needs professional instruction to get better. What's your take on that?
It definitely helps. I'd say coaching at a lower level is I don't know. It's a quicker way to get better, but you can learn those mechanics on your own. But sometimes instruction, well, it will help for sure. It's just really what you're willing to spend your money on. Like, you know, it's obviously. I mean, even you've noticed, Mr. Vitter, like just from coaching lower players, some players aren't quite ready for specific types of instruction and need to just really kind of focus on the basics. But you know, that's just kind of where their game's at. So it just kind of leads them into better and better players. It's really just what you want to spend your money on, I guess.
Cool. Dear EG Machine, I was wondering how important is it to set hatcheries to different hotkeys, and how do you feel about having all your hatcheries on a global hotkey?
Universal hotkey, I think, is actually an extremely good idea. Unfortunately for me, because I've had the same kind of hotkeys for, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years. I've been playing Brood War professionally, pretty much. I do actually have my hatcheries on separate hotkeys. Makes it nicer in case you have to deal with the drop, or you need to pan your screen over to base or spawn larva. But a universal hotkey is something that I'm actually going to try and add into my play here pretty soon, now that Blizzard added like adjustable hotkeys. And so I kind of see both sides. Like I'm probably going to hotkey my hatcheries individually and have a universal hotkey as well, just to, you know, so I kind of get the best of both worlds, I guess.
Sweet. All right, here's a question that kind of stems back to the very first game we played tonight. I have a Terran practice partner who opens with 2 racks pressure, expands, and then techs heavily to Ravens while getting lots of upgrades and pressuring constantly. I feel like the auto turrets really negate the effectiveness of my mutas. How do I need to be dealing with this cost effectively? We sort of touched on this earlier, but as you said, the guy that we were playing against didn't make quite enough Ravens to be a true nuisance.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Well, if he's doing the build that I think he's talking about, honestly, you need to have some sort of tank. You're correct. It is extremely inefficient to engage against auto turrets with pure Mutalisks, just because obviously the auto turrets only cost energy. Mutalisks are extremely expensive, and auto turrets actually have a sizable amount of HP. So what I do is I kind of just engage with the Zerglings, use them to tank, and then go ahead and use my Mutalisk kind of to add in the DPS and kind of mop them up pretty quickly.
Okay. Here's a question about hand positioning. This guy says, I have noticed that a lot of Zerg players like to use 5 as a sort of central hotkey, be it for hatcheries, queens, or what have you. After playing RTS for many years, I've developed the habit of keeping my hand on the far left of my keyboard and only using my index finger for keyboard presses. Is this a bad habit? How do you position your hands, and what are your hands doing in the course of a game?
You definitely do want to use more than your index finger, that's for sure. But I don't know, I kind of have my hands centralized more towards the left of the keyboard. I guess if I'm just kind of resting, I place, index on 4, mid on 3, ring finger on 2, and pinky on, like, I guess tab or whatever. I don't know, that's more just being like adjustable. If you're really comfortable with your keyboard, you should be able to jump around no problem. It shouldn't really depend so much on the positioning of your hand, because it should constantly be moving. Like, I'm still using my hotkeys. From Brood War, I'm used to using 0 through 1, so I'm pretty good at just jumping across the whole keyboard without too much of a problem. But I guess I'd still typically keep my hand centralized on, as you'd say, around the 5 key, and that's just because from Brood War, like, 5 is going to be your like main hatchery hotkey, and so that's the one you're kind of jumping to the most.
Cool. All right, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to kick it back to you and let you just give us any extra thoughts that you have before we wrap up.
Okay.
The question is, you talked about how hatch first is not good on steps because of the distance from the natural, or from the main to the natural. Is there a rule of thumb, or what is the rule of thumb for choosing a build in ZVT regards to map placement and the distance between the main and the nat?
Honestly, it only really has to do with 2 maps specifically, Steppes of War and Delta Quadrant. Both of them, very long distance between the main and natural. Delta Quadrant even more so, and very awkward positioning of the natural. It limits the number of builds you can do early on as a Zerg player. Basically, you just can't go hatchery first, which is like the most important build in my opinion. So those are more the maps where you'd want to open up Speedling, open up like your Speedling, Baneling Bus, 12 Drone Rush, if you saw the SGL Invitational, something like that. But at the same time, it can be an advantage to players like that are known for being very cheesy on those maps, so that they can actually open some sort of hatch first build and not have to worry about any sort of early pressure, I guess.
Cool. All right. I said that was going to be the last question, but I have one more because I feel like this one has to be addressed.
Okay, no problem.
This guy asks, he says, I feel that Zerg is really hard at the lower levels of play, and I've been thinking about switching to Terran because it's more fun. I win more. How do I get through this tough time? How do I stop myself from picking Terran?
Honestly, at the lower levels, Zerg is, I don't know, it's much more mechanically hard to play, just because unlike, Terran, who has mules that like kind of gives something towards the economy, Protoss has Chrono Boost that kind of speeds things up. If you're missing your spawn larvas, you're not gaining anything, you're just falling farther and farther behind. So that's why you'll see Zergs kind of struggle at the lower level. I don't know. If you really want to stick with Zerg and you're having a good time with him, just